Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is IFMA's webinar series. Today, our topic that we're going to be talking with Rheaply about is circular facilities, how furniture, fixtures, and equipment, or for short, FF&E, reuse bolsters decarbonization efforts. That's a hot topic. It's really a driving force behind a lot of conversation and what the facilities profession is facing right now. So it's extremely timely. I would love for you to please let us know where you're joining us in from. If you would type in comments, I'm Kim Jackson. I am with IFMA and I'm joining you from Houston, Texas. And joining us in this webinar, I'm going to be introducing our panel here. First up is going to be Dr. Garry Cooper. He is the co-founder and CEO of Rheaply, a Chicago-based climate technology company which scales reuse programs for large organizations by helping them better utilize physical resources. Previously, Garry served on the faculty of Northwestern University and facilitated supply chain improvements for enterprise businesses at Ernst & Young. He holds a PhD in neuroscience, Dr. Garry, from Northwestern University, a certificate in management from the Kellogg School of Management, and a BS MBA in mathematics and chemistry from Indiana University. Dr. Garry, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. And it's just Garry. Only my grandmother calls me doctor.
Wonderful. I'm so excited about this. Rheaply's doing amazing things in our partnership together to bring this thought leadership to IFMA and our members and the profession
Yes,
is very, very important to us. So
super
welcome.
excited to be here. Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's bring Daniel in. Daniel Kietzer is the Senior Director of Sustainability at Rheaply. Hi, Daniel. With over a decade of experience in circular economy and sustainability, consistently driving impactful projects with visionary companies and organizations worldwide, he is deeply rooted in advancing reuse and recycling markets. Daniel's influence and inspiration spans a broad spectrum of intersectional sustainability topics, including social entrepreneurship. I got it out, Daniel. Urban planning, water preservation, and carbon reduction strategies. Daniel, that's amazing what you're able to do in those intersectional sustainabilities, and we're so glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. I'm very, very excited to be here with you all today. And I didn't know this, but I'm just up the road from you in Austin, Texas. So we'll have to meet halfway one of these days.
Oh, fantastic! Yes, and of course, you're so close to San Antonio. That's where World Workplace is going to be held. So excited about that. Yes, very good, fellow Texan. Um, our last panelist and very distinguished panelist is Guillermo Mejeras. He is the global head of facilities management and net zero at Citi. Hi, Guillermo. During his 7-year tenure at Citi, he has held many roles in the Latin America and Mexico regions, managing over 20 countries. His most notable achievements include implementing the aligned asset and facilities management operating model in Mexico before expanding globally, leading branch transformation in over 600 retail branches, and facilitating the office consolidation in Mexico from 19 to 2 buildings. Definitely an FM that is making a difference. Welcome, Guillermo.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nim. And thank you for the invitation. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to be in this event.
Wonderful. Gentlemen, I'm going to leave y'all to it, and I'll be joining you later for Q&A. So I would like to remind those watching us live, please post any questions that come up. This is a very important topic. It's going to help us to change the world. I know that sounds lofty, but that is IFMA's mission. So, gentlemen, without further ado, I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Everyone out there. So Garry here again, and I want to tell you a little bit about Rheaply, which is a Chicago-based climate technology company. And you can see right in the middle of this slide our mission, which is to build a community where every workplace resource finds its next best use. So just breaking that down just for a few seconds, yes, we are a technology company, but we view our solution to be about building a community. So that's why you see the word community right there. And where do things that we no longer need go? They go back into our community, hopefully, and not into the landfill. And what our job at Rheaply is to find what's the next best use for any item in any workplace where it can go, and hopefully, again, empowering the community. Below that, you can see 5 different kind of stats that we're able to share. There's some things that we're not able to share in our company that kind of tell you a little bit about the journey that we've been on in the prior year. So we have north of 1 million reusable assets from the workplace on our platform, again, for people in the community to take advantage of. We delivered conservatively over $2.5 million of recapture value for our customers. Our community exists around over 3,000 what we call ecosystem partners. So those are going to be businesses and small nonprofits and recyclers of all sizes and stripes, so that items have a place to go when they're not usable in your workplace anymore. And then we show we are a sustainability company, right? So we show a few things on the carbon and the waste front in the last 2 bullets. And I did a little math with a little help from ChatGPT, and the 1.6 million tons of weight that we diverted last year is about 3.5 statues of liberty that we diverted from landfill as a small company. And the number that you see associated with our carbon avoidance last year is equivalent to about 391 car trips for a whole year, or 7.6 million individual car trips. So it turns out that actually trying to remove carbon, divert waste by making facilities more circular actually does help you towards your carbon and waste goals. And we'll obviously talk a lot more about that today. Next slide. Which leads us to our agenda. So this is probably going to be the fastest slide that you'll see today, but we're going to do a little bit of what is this thing, circular economy, for those who have heard it and those who are okay with relearning what it might be. And then we're going to deep dive into like how does that predominate and operationalize itself from a reuse perspective into facilities operations. Then we're going to have Guillermo take us through cities' commitment and how they're operationalizing this and their important commitments and goals. And then we're going to talk about this more largely at an FF&E reuse and decarbonization perspective. And then with a little bit of closing, we're going to have about 8 or so minutes for any question that you all might have for either myself, Daniel, or Guillermo. Okay, so chapter 1 of our journey together. So thinking about a facility manager's intro to what this thing is, the circular economy, I think, what would my grandmother ask me about this? So to start us off, we have the best people in the world with us to kind of take us through a little bit of a quick vocab refresh. So I'm going to start with my friend Guillermo to take us through what does reuse mean to him and to Citigroup?
Thank you, Gary. Reuse is be intelligent on using the assets that you have as a company. I mean, a lot of times we change places, we refurbish, we close offices. So what we do now is we think a little bit further ahead of, okay, what assets do I have and what would be the best use for those assets? Not only within the company, but also with the community where we operate.
Awesome. And Daniel, my friend, my colleague, take us through a little bit of what is the linear economy.
Yeah, so linear economy represents largely how we do things today. So it speaks to an economic system where we take resources from the earth, we make things, and then typically we throw things away. The recent stats around that show some pretty staggering figures. I would say roughly 90% of what we make today goes right into the landfill, which is crazy to me. But I think I look at that number and I see a challenge, and that challenge in my mind is making this transition to the third box on this slide, the circular economy.
Yes, and the circular economy, if I were explaining to my grandmother, is trying to build an economy that kind of models nature, right? So nature in itself, there's not really observed waste. And so if you think about how to go from a linear economy like Daniel was just talking about to one that doesn't have waste and innately is regenerative, it means that we're eliminating waste from the design of products and how we use products. But then it also means that we're super intentional about reusing and using the resources that we have above ground as much as physically as possible. And it not only delivers on the next slide this really important sustainability, waste and carbon benefit, it also is an economy. So it generates actual savings and or new revenue. So the way that I think about this, and we have this graph, and obviously on the left side, you can see the line from things being extracted to straight to the landfill, like Daniel was speaking to, versus the circular economy, which is an economy built on regeneration. I want to, have a headline that you can leave with, and like, how do I think about this? This is how I think about it. The linear economy is an economy where waste is a feature. The linear economy is an economy where waste is a feature. The circular economy is an economy where waste is a bug. We are trying to design out waste in a circular motion, and waste is a part of a linear economy. And a few other things outside of the slides as you read through it that I kind of wrote down is that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, thinking about the economy part, estimates that the global opportunity for a circular economy is somewhere around $4.5 trillion in savings. So $4.5 trillion of savings could be had if we were to have a global economy. And Daniel mentioned a little bit towards our attraction towards that. Well, if we were to, right now we're about 7.1, 7.2% of materials are circulated. But if we were to get to 17, from 7.1 or 2 to 17%, it's estimated that we could save the world 39% of our current CO2 debt. So we could reduce CO2 by 39% if we have basically 2x or so our circularity. So it's so a part of our decarbonization strategy to grow circular economy. And again, we think there's a central role for facilities management. Next slide. So beyond linear economy, waste is a feature, circular economy, waste is the bug, there are 3 established principles for a circular economy. These are most noted through the work of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. So the first is eliminate waste. We've been talking about that. That should be definitely a big takeaway. The second is, and I think this is most important when we think about reuse, is how can we keep products and materials at their highest value for as long as possible? So when we make something with materials, how can we just keep reusing it and or reusing its materials as much as possible? And the third is to be regenerative of nature and to the root resources. And so we think, in the next slide, that there should be maybe a small addition to the principles of a circular economy, which is we have to be mindful of our consumption. It's not just reusing things as much as possible. We also have to think of just net consumption. Do we need that extra chair? Do we need to buy a new chair or a new facility? And for this, I wanted to bring one stat that I keep dear to my heart, which is so-called the Earth Overshoot Day. So this is the day where we have used all of Earth's regenerative resources for a whole year. That day is scheduled to this year, should be on December 31st, is going to be on August 1st. And I can tell you almost every year, it goes further and further up the calendar. And I noted that here in 2022, the globe used 2.5 Earths of Earth's resources that it naturally produced. And so even if we made everything regenerative and circular and eliminating waste, we still have a net consumption problem that we think is super important. And okay, so we're going to now transition to talk about reuse and some of the key facility benefits.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So with kind of with that framing and circularity and the kind of big picture visioning for what circular economy means and the impact that it can have. Let's now zoom in on the role of circularity and reuse in facility operations. So we know a couple of kind of headline facts, and that is that companies are burdened with some very expensive problems when it comes to physical resources. The cost of warehousing is incredibly expensive and is increasing year over year. This figure comes from I think just last month's metrics here. About $8 a square foot average in the U.S. It's more expensive in some regions than others, but if we're looking at a 100,000 square foot warehouse, that's about $800,000 a year just for the cost of renting that warehouse space. So on the flip side of that, if companies are wasting materials and that material is going to landfill, that adds up to some pretty significant dollars as well on landfill tipping fees. So this 450 million figure, again, averaged landfill tipping fees across the US, combined against some of the figures on our next slide around the amount of waste that's going to landfill. So about 17 billion pounds of office assets go to landfill each year in the US, which is a very, very significant number and a whole lot of stuff. And that represents about 80% of furniture and equipment that's in use today. So so a lot of waste problems, a lot of expensive problems, but it also gets worse. And so when we add up the storage costs, the warranty, the additional risk that comes along with holding assets and holding inventory, the carrying cost of doing so is about 25% of the original purchase price of that product, and that just continues over time as long as that product is being held. Meanwhile, on the kind of same side of the coin there, the average company is underutilizing 30% or more of their assets. So there's a lot of really, really good product and really good furniture, fixtures, and equipment that are sitting that aren't being used that we think should be used today. A story from just one of our customers, and we hear these stories day in, day out. This was a customer in the Bay Area. They had just a small office worth of FF&E that they were storing offsite at a third-party warehouse. They spent over $200,000 just on storage costs for this relatively small office worth of material. So over time, when we're looking at really, really large enterprises, that number grows significantly. So if we do the math and we put all of this together, if we look at the estimated costs per employee to furnish an office space, and multiply that by the number of employees for not even a super large enterprise, but a normal size enterprise organization, multiply that by those carrying costs, multiply that by the percentage of underutilized assets, all of that adds up to some pretty significant numbers at the end of the year. And that's those are the realities that we're really trying to change here at Rheaply. And I think also it's important for us to be real about the evolving real estate portfolio that we're seeing across the commercial office real estate space in the U.S. We know office spaces are changing. There's other kind of financial implications that are very real today that are impacting our buildings and impacting our spaces. And companies are changing sizes and changing shapes very, very rapidly right now. So, all of this is leading to a substantial amount of office space that's also sitting idle today. And when we think about all of that space and all of the stuff that goes into those spaces, we're looking at a very, very significant problem. So how does reuse change the narrative? We try to keep this as simple as possible to understand. What we're all about here at Rheaply, and what we're really trying to do is set up programs and set up environments enabled by our technology that helps these really large enterprise operations save time, share resources, and cut over procurement. Saving time comes from being able to source from products and materials that are already there, that are probably sitting idle, to cut lead time when we're talking about sourcing new product versus going down the hall or going to this warehouse that's right next door to find stuff instead. Sharing resources, really emphasizing that community impact piece of this. So when we look at all of the value that's embedded in these products that are sitting there going underutilized, if we were to share those same products and resources with our community, we could make a substantial impact from those materials to organizations that are doing really, really good work in regions where we operate. And we can also cut over procurement. So by sourcing from things that we already have, we're not going out and buying new product, and we're saving a considerable amount of money in the process of doing so. Okay, I'll pass things over to Guillermo to talk about all of this through the lens of City.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. So City began its commitment to go a little cleaner since 2000. It went public in 2010, but if you go to the next slide, this is how City has been operating for the last couple of years, 14 years now. So what City did is it made a public commitment to reduce our impact on the community where we operate. So we put some goals that in first they were looking a little challenging, honestly. So we said that we were going to reduce by 2025 our GHG emissions by 45%. As of 2023, we have already reached 49%. And this is basically some of the things that Daniel was just speaking. I mean, there's a reduction in the office portfolio because we have optimized the use of our square footage on our offices across the globe. In the case of energy, we are committed to reduce 40% of our energy consumption. We have reached 35% by the end of 2023, so we're close to the goal. And we also committed to maintain 100% of renewable electricity sourcing, which we are there since 2022 and continue to be there. On the water, we committed to reduce 30% of the total water consumption. We have reached 33% from the 2010 base. And where we are a little behind is on the use of reclaimed or reused sources. This is not, now we know this is not so simple, but we're working hardly to move that data. On the sustainable buildings, we committed that 40% of the overall portfolio would be on a LEED well or equivalent certified process. We have reached 41%. This includes some projects in Latin America and Mexico that are EDGE certified. City is proud to, for example, say that we have the first private museum on a historic building that comes from the 17th century that is EDGE certified in Mexico City. So this is the type of commitment that City has made and are working and really delivering. And waste, which is something that we just mentioned in this presentation. We committed a 50% reduction of waste that we generate. So we have reached 53%. So which, I mean, it's a great achievement. We will continue pushing on not only improving our recycling processes for the waste we generate, but to reduce the waste we generate. We have committed to a 50% diversion of waste to landfill. We are 30% now and working to improve, basically through our recycling of our own waste, but also the things that we're doing, like, for example, with Rheaply, that we have done in the past. There's a couple of projects that we work together and we improve our numbers. So I think that city is on the way to achieve the goals that they committed. The information is public. We publish every year our ESG report, and I think that we are on the right path to improve our commitment and our deliveries to this goal that we have. From my position on the facility management and net zero role now, I think it's important that we were talking. Facility management has changed its role in all this process after the pandemic. So there's the commitment and the deliveries that we have reached. If you can change to the next slide, please. So as I was telling you, we began this path in 2000. No, I mean the base is 2010, but the path began in 2000. In 2007, city set the first GHG emission reduction goal. We had our first building LEED certified. In 2010, we won the US EPA Energy Star Partner of the Year, and you may see in this graph how the path has been moving along the way. We have a big goal for 2023 of beginning a big renovation of the London City Tower that it's focused on being zero carbon ready when we finish the project. The project is going to be finished by 2025. And we are on the path, I mean, working not only by ourselves, but also partnering with our suppliers, with our general contractors. So this is a teamwork. And I think that's part of what we have also committed at City, because we are not only working with our resources, but joining everybody that is committed into this big challenge that the planet has. So we are trying to reduce our impact to the community. And I was mentioning about the recycling and waste diversion. In 2023, we work in 3 projects with Rheaply, where we donated about 1,400 office furnitures, and that diverted about 62 metric tons out of the landfill. So that's part of the change that we have been implementing. In my presentation, we talk about the Mexico City office reduction, going from 19 to 2 buildings. Of course, there was a lot of buildings that were closed, and the process was the same. I mean, the furniture was not thrown away; it was either reused by city or donated to somebody else that would use it in a more intelligent way than just throw it away. So I think that that's the way that we have been working. Important to say that in 2021 we achieved the world certification for our portfolio globally, and that is also focusing on the health and the way that people leave our offices and branches. I will pass it back to Garry.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Yeah, so now, and phenomenal work, Guillermo. Yeah, just some amazing numbers and some amazing stories coming from all of that. So connecting things back now to how furniture, fixture, and equipment reuse connects to decarbonization. So to recap what we've heard so far, so we know today's workplaces are changing rapidly, and this is putting a significant amount of pressure on facility managers that need to know what resources exist, need to be able to make better decisions around sustainable purchasing, but also need to manage resources more effectively as these spaces are changing size and shape. When we look at that through the lens of carbon, a couple of kind of foundational terms that I wanted to put in everybody's minds first. So So in the building space in particular, we like to look at two areas. So embodied carbon and operational carbon. Operational carbon kind of speaks to the carbon associated with operating a building. So carbon associated with the power to keep the lights on, carbon associated with kind of the day-to-day running of a building. I would say, generally speaking, we've gotten pretty good at dealing with operational carbon. You can throw heat pumps on a building, you can put solar panels on a building. There's all sorts of new technology to do really, really great things to lower that number to some pretty dramatic levels. On the flip side of that, embodied carbon is still an area where I think we're just starting to learn how to make some impact. So embodied carbon refers to all of the carbon that's emitted in the manufacturing, in the extraction of raw material, in the transportation, in the end of life of durable products. So the chair that I'm sitting in, for example, has an embodied carbon figure associated with it that represents all of the carbon that was emitted into the atmosphere to produce that chair. When we add that up, and if you jump to the next slide, that represents some pretty significant numbers. So these are kind of averages across a couple of different common product categories that we see in an office. So a lounge chair, about 45 kilograms of CO2. Your standard task chair, about 70 kilograms of CO2. A desk, a workstation, about 30 kilograms. A laptop, when we get into the electronic space, we see some pretty wild numbers there, but your typical laptop, about 150 kilograms of CO2. So all of that represents carbon that was emitted into the atmosphere to produce a single product. If we think back in the presentation when we were looking at weight of office furniture and weight of materials that are going to landfill, the carbon that's emitted from those producing those materials, at the low end, 2 times the amount. At the high end, 100 times the amount. So we're generating all of this carbon to make stuff that, unfortunately, today we're just throwing away. And so that when we think about embodied carbon, when we think about how companies are reporting on carbon, that story and that narrative is incredibly important. But zooming in a little bit into the reporting side of this, so companies are seeing more and more pressure now to report on Scope 3 emissions, which is a kind of you can kind of think of it as the everything else scope. So the emissions from your operations, if you're in like an intensive manufacturing industry, that's Scope 1. Emissions associated with electricity that you're purchasing, that's Scope 2. Emissions associated with everything else is Scope 3. It covers this broad range of categories that you see here on the right, 15 per the GHG protocol. And reuse and circularity has significant impacts on a couple of these that we wanted to call out. The biggest being that first category of purchased goods and services. So that's everything that a company is purchasing for its operations, including its furniture, its fixtures, equipment, and the embodied carbon of those products all adds up and goes into that first category. So you can kind of see and think about, as we get better and better at using our stuff more effectively and more efficiently, we can reduce the amount of purchased goods and services that we're bringing into our organization, thus creating a pretty big impact on our Scope 3, our Scope 3 narrative. So that's a really kind of important connection that I wanted to make here, and an important connection I hope that you all can also bring back to your leadership and bring back to folks that are having these conversations around, what do we do with our Scope 3s? How do we measure it? How do we change it over time? This is a pretty important area to focus. But I wanted to pass it back to Guillermo here to talk a little bit about how Citi is looking at Scope 3, including some of the notes that I just talked about.
Thank you, Dan. So what City is doing about Scope 3. We have committed to be net zero by 2050. It's a public commitment made by our CEO, and what we're doing. One, we are working as a bank, as the most global bank, to help our clients to move to a more sustainable low economy way to operate. So we help our clients to introduce this low carbon emission mindset. And we actually are reviewing now our client portfolio to work with the more sustainable companies. I mean, we prefer to work with more sustainable companies because we think we can play a big important role on that path. Also, all our buildings, everything we do globally, it's now ready to be zero carbon by 2030. What we did is we now include the net zero principles into our design and construction guidelines. So there's not a single project developed by City across the world that does not include these net zero guidelines. And that way, we think we're going to be achieving this readiness by 2030. The City Tower in London is one of the biggest examples that we have because it's a huge project. It's a very big office building. So I think that this is really important because it's what we can do on our own. And also, we have, since last year, 2023, we have updated our supplier principles. So now we work with our suppliers and we go deep into their operational models to understand how committed are they on this sustainable pathway. So we request from them not only to attest that they are doing some carbon emission reductions or whatever, but we actually request them to bring us some evidence and work with them in helping them to achieve this. One of the biggest impact that we have on the carbon reduction emission is also anyone in City, every time you request a travel, one of the things that you will see when you are requesting the travel in the system is the data of the emissions that your travel is going to be having. So sometimes that will, and honestly, we've seen a reduction in the number of travels that people are requesting, not only because in a financial point of view or economic point of view, but because people are more conscious about this carbon emission. Every time we travel or we move from one place to another, we are doing that. We're also implementing through the LEED certifications or EDGE certifications, things like we're putting special parking spaces within our facilities for bikes, electric cars. I mean, we are trying to help our own employees to go into this path of, okay, let's be a little bit more cleaner on the way we use energy. So I think the commitment is there again, and the evidence that City is actually doing something, it's also there. I mean, and we will continue on this path. I think we've mentioned about how the buildings need to change and how facility management now is part of that big change. And we are installing EV charger in most of our big offices. So any employee that has an electric car will be able to go and charge their own car. That will help avoiding. We're also promoting, and I think we had this in Colombia. There was an app that was launched by one employee where we promote the use of shared rides. So you can, as a City employee, go there, subscribe yourself. If anyone is on your route, they will let you know. So it's that kind of small things that are piling up into our results. So that is basically what we're doing, and especially on Scope 3, working with clients and working with suppliers. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Guillermo. And it's honestly quite incredible to not just see city's commitment publicly and the progress that you've all made, but like the kind of action plan forward. So excited to continue to be a partner with you through the journey. I wanted to take a moment to do a few commercials. So one commercial was about and I think actually Kim mentioned at the beginning, IFMA World Workplace, which is going to be in Austin. Rheaply will be there. One of our partners, CBRE, will be there, and I want to talk a little bit about CBRE's message that I think really ties a lot of what we talked about today from the last World Workplace into our conversation. So, of the things that they said were key messages and trends last year were cost certainty, operational efficiency, sustainability, data at scale, and then trying to balance all the priorities that a facilities leader has these days, especially in a post-COVID world. Um, and one of the things that we felt were most compelling was the importance around what they called asset excellence. You can kind of see that in this kind of grayish box. And that's extending the life expectancy, decreasing failures, and reducing costs around purchasing and maintaining assets. And obviously, we agree with that. But we think at Rheaply, it's important to know where your assets are, what condition they're in, who's maintaining them. Because if you don't do that, you can't really have asset excellence. And that becomes an even bigger risk to your business, not just from the reporting side, but on the operational efficiency side. So that's one thing that we do, I think, quite well. I have to say that as a CEO of the company, but I think the proof is in the pudding and some of the work that we've already talked about in the prior part of the conversation. So look to see you soon. But as a takeaway, we've gone through a lot. We've gone through cities leadership and some bits and pieces that Rheaply's helped along the way. But I wanted to kind of bring it home to like three things. I love the rule of three, right? So the first is what Daniel was talking about, durable goods, and somewhere between 30 equivalents of carbon to 70 for FF&E. So first thing on the carbon side. So the first thing is find ways to circulate and recirculate as much as possible your fixtures, furniture, and equipment. That is a part of not just a waste reduction and diversion strategy, it's a part of a decarbonization strategy. And I would even posit it's a part of a cost minimization and operational efficiency strategy. That's because the carrying costs don't make sense. It doesn't make sense to be spending you saw the math slide, the dollars to have items that have a lot of carbon embodied in them if you're not using them and you don't know where they are. And then the third is make a commitment and be bold. The world that we have isn't ours. It's to our children and our grandchildren. And I think it's upon us as leaders is to ask, what can we do over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, to get us to a world that is sustained for the futures beyond? And if anything, taking a tip from cities leadership around their net zero goals, I think sets up a great frame for any company of any size to kind of mirror the commitments that I think are needed in the working world. And so with circulate, cut your costs, and commit boldly. Three things. And then the last thing I'll say before we get to some questions is just a few CTAs. And I think these might be being dropped into the channel, but we would love for all folks on this call to commit their organization to our pledge, which is a nothing new pledge. You can go read more about it at rheaply.com/nothing dash new, and that'll be in the channel. And then also take a look at Cities 23 Global ESG Report. I'm a super nerd, if you didn't hear from my bio, so I actually read ESG reports and sustainability reports. This one's especially good. I've already read it, so I would have that as weekend homework, if you will, on both accounts. And we hope to hear from you and your questions. And I guess we can now formally open it up for questions.
Hello, gentlemen. I'm back. I'm back for questions from the audience.
Yes.
Just an amazing presentation and a lot of, I think, food for thought for facility managers. Guillermo, definitely, I really appreciate you sharing some insight into what Citigroup is doing, the impact that it has. We do talk about making the world a better place, but sometimes it starts with the bottom line.
Mhm.
And we like to do things to feel good, but there's a reality to it. And to get everybody's buy-in, I feel like those last three things that you just left us with, Gary, it hits every single one.
Mhm.
So, Guillermo, for people who are just getting started on their net zero journeys at their companies, where would you recommend that we start to make the fastest early impact?
I think energy consumption is one of the biggest themes because honestly, it's also easily achievable, and that will help the company to begin that path uh, on making achievements and see the achievements. My suggestion would be begin with energy. Waste is also important. You can work on both of them. Uh, Build different waste. You need to think, and I think what Gary just showed us, those 3 points about your assets, what you do with them. Uh, you have a maintenance program, yes, but everything has an end of life. So what's going to happen next? So my suggestion would be begin to with energy and put waste in the second step.
Wonderful. That makes a lot of sense. I know I hear from FMs a lot that it's, where do I start? And
Mhm.
then also they need to get buy-in for the changes that they see that need to be made, and that helps them influence leadership to make those changes. Gary or Daniel, anything to add to that?
I agree with Guillermo. What the biggest shot could be if you're just starting the journey with like how Daniel was speaking to, the technologies for reducing operational carbon are quite commercial and available, and I think implementation of those strategies is quite well documented. I would say sometimes those can be really seen as investments, and so the business cases around those and the proposal writing around those internally to a company could be a lot. And so I think on the embodied carbon side, and Guillermo was talking about waste and FF&E management, in the work that we do at Rheaply, the lifts to getting a good pop and reduction of carbon, diversion of waste, reduction of costs for the investment is much less. And operationalizing that happens in a month and not several years. And so what I might counsel is on net new building projects and or buildings that are up for retrofit, if you've not done anything in the operational side, it might be a really great time to look at that. But if there aren't any big projects or retrofits scheduled, what I would suggest is the biggest pop for your investment dollar would be how do we have a circular workplace? And it sounds buzzy, but it's just how do we reuse and account for the things that we've already purchased, and then make sure that they go to good homes when we no longer need them.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know, Gary, you referenced what Daniel shared, and I feel that that has a lot of weight to it because with IFMA on our research side, we're actually in the midst of doing a lot of research on the circular economy as compared to a linear economy because it's
Yes.
about the economy. I mean, it's a business
Oh,
model and
yes.
seeing the costs of the carrying costs and then
Yes.
the tipping in costs for waste
Yes.
that I mean, when you phrase
Yes.
it that way, if you look at storing certain,
Yep.
depreciable assets, it's going to build up. And yeah, if you
Yes.
look at a monthly fee, it's doable. But then maybe the FM showing, hey, we're going to keep paying for these assets that
Totally.
really aren't going to be used by us. So let's clear house, right?
Well, totally. And I also think that I think at least two things. The first is that it can be quite daunting because the way in which great facility management and companies have thought about their FFE and thought about their assets has not been at the top packing order, and they have, they'll have the way that they've already always decommed a space, or when they purchase new furniture, the way that we've always purchased net new furniture. And so I think that muscle is pretty well exercise for most experienced FMs. What I would say is that if you give circularity a look, and or just have a conversation with someone at Rheaply, and we're happy to have a conversation with you, I think what you might discover is you win both on costs and you actually win on efficiency. Though it sounds new, and as a former consultant, I know new means implementation, and implementation is like, oh my gosh, I hate implementation. What I would counsel is that actually being more circular allows you to operate at a much higher efficiency level. And so I think that would be like one thing I would highlight. And then the second thing is, and we were talking about this in the kind of preamble to this conversation, is the growing role of a facility manager. 2.5 years ago, facility managers were essentially public health workers within companies, figuring out how people could walk and how 6 feet away, wear a mask, where's our PPE. And then now, facilities managers are part of sustainability. I would say, as my second bullet, I think there's an opportunity on the asset side to think about your assets as a way to be a CSR agent, right? How can we use the things that we are no longer needing in our workspace by reducing that carrying costs to actually empower the communities that we operate in? Instead of sending these items to landfill, can we send value back into the community? And so when I think about a truly circular workplace, it's not just us reusing the items intramurally as much as we possibly can. It's also how can we reduce the net impact to the environments and the communities that we actually operate in? And we think at Rheaply, and we're not the only ones, how can we actually improve that? And so the work that Guillermo talked about with those 1,400 chairs that were donated, those
Yeah.
went back into the community that city was operating in, and actually to schools. So the story there is and powerful, so powerful. So what I might counsel is like just thinking a little bit further than what we've used to do over the 20 or 30 years gains you operational efficiency. But I also think it gives you, as a facility manager, this whole new window to be a community agent.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Guillermo, what are your thoughts on that?
Nope. I think Gary is right. I mean, you need to think about the way you use your assets, and we talk about it during the presentation. The example we're putting, it's something that honestly City has been doing for the last couple of years, and it's thinking about the community where you operate, uh,
Mm.
and it's giving back something to them instead of just throwing away to the landfill. So we've done it globally. It has been done in Argentina, Asia Pacific, in the US. It's done, honestly, we do it in most of our projects. And I think it's part of the circular economy that we've been speaking. I mean, we work in a community, in an environment, so we need to protect that environment also, because we are part of the environment, not only in our small world of our own building. So I think it's think bigger, think about where you are, and I think it's the right thing to do, honestly.
I agree 100%. For facility managers, it's not just place, but it's people, and
Mm.
it's purpose. We want people to be able to do what they need to do in the facilities that we're caring for, but it's also imperative that we take care of our communities. I always say, especially when I'm thinking of waste, I really don't want to live near a garbage dump. I don't want to have our oceans full of garbage, and it's
No one
not
does.
if you put it in those terms, it's like, yeah, I think everybody
Yep,
globally can say, you know what, I don't want that either.
that's right.
And we need to be paying attention to that. We have a really great statement from Dean Stanberry. He is IFMA's global chair or chair of our global board of directors. And I don't know, Jack, in the background, if we could go ahead and show that on the screen. Dean is very, very aware and an advocate for sustainability, looking forward. So Dean says commercial real estate is attributed to 37% of global carbon emissions. So 80 to 85% of that's incurred in the building's operation. Average lifespan in the US, let's say 74 years. Over that lifespan is going to continue to accumulate embodied and operational carbon. So if FMs think about the consumable products used in a building every day, many do not generate operational carbon emissions on their own, but it incurs embodied. And then if we can go to the next one, Jack. Or is that the end of it? So that may be the end of it. So if it does incur the embodied carbon,
That's right.
yes, and I think this speaks to if we're all working towards a net zero carbon emission for our buildings, it that doesn't end. It doesn't stop building
Right.
up with the
That's right.
completion of a retrofit or a brand new building. Operating a
Yeah,
building is going to create that.
yeah, I,
So,
I
Jack, if we
completely
could go
agree
ahead
with
and take
you.
the quote down. Thank you. Go
Yeah, I
ahead,
completely
Garry.
agree with you. I completely agree with you, Kim. And maybe one way to kind of crystallize from the beginning of the presentation, where we kind of talked about the circular economy writ large and kind of zoomed into how it might help facilities leaders. One way to crystallize this is we can't globally get to net zero without a circular economy. I would posit that we can't get to net zero from a workplace or a building perspective without a circular workplace. So if you think about both of those, it's that there is a role for how do we use and reuse the things that we purchase, and how can we be thoughtful about where they go when we no longer need them. That component is such an important component both in the economy writ large that we talked about, but also if we zoom down from an FF&E and facilities manager perspective. And so I just wanted to tie those two things that we can't get to zero globally without a circular economy, and I don't think we can get to net zero in any building or company without some type of circular approach to the assets.
Wonderful. And the timing's perfect, Garry. Unfortunately, I wish we had another 30 minutes, but I know that we're at time. So, Garry, I think that tied it in really nicely. Guillermo, any final thoughts for your facility management colleagues, those who are out there and facing the same challenges that city has faced?
I think what Gary mentioned. I mean, we need to begin to think on a circular economy, and also city is a global bank. We have premises around the world, but also we need to think about specific locations, the community where we're operating. How do we operate in that particular community using the resources that the community has? So again, we are a global bank, but we operate differently depending on the place where we are. And I think that's something that we need to take into account also.
Yeah, agreed. Daniel, any final words for us?
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, this has been phenomenal. As folks in the audience are kind of starting or continuing their journeys down this path, look to us as resources, as people that are in your corner. We've got your back, and we're here to help. So yeah, so just thank you for the opportunity to let us talk today and to share some of the things that we're doing, and hopefully our paths all cross in the future.
Wonderful. This has been amazing. I would encourage those of you who are watching this webinar to look at ifma.org. We have a knowledge library and we have other resources. Rheaply has been kind enough to send some of this thought leadership so that you can make the best informed decision for your company and for your community. Gentlemen, thank you so much for a wonderful webinar. With that, we please like and share so others can find this, and leave any comments. We'll continue to watch that. Thank you, everyone.